Okay. Tonight's class is dedicated sponsored by Yehuda Greenberg. Today was her birthday. Vov Tavis was her birthday. She should have a Shnas Hatzlacha and all good things. Gashmis, Ruchnius, and very, very successful year.
Amen.
This week's Parsha is Vayigash. It's a very, very interesting Parsha. A lot of details, a lot of lessons. Just some at the beginning of the Parsha to show everything in Torah is very special and very unique. At the beginning of the Parsha, it says, Vayigash of Yehuda. Yehuda came close to Yosef. Vayemer, and he said, Bi Adoni, please my master. So there's what's called the trop. When they read the Torah, there's the cantonation, I think it's called in English. It's the trop. And the trop and the words, this is from the Vilna Gaon says this, that the trop and the words, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, is Kadma. The name of the trop is called Kadma Va'azal Revi, and Vayemer Biadeni is Zarka Munach Segel. That's the name of the trop of Vayigash Elav Yehuda Vayemer Biadeni. So the Vilna Gaon explains that the trop explains the meaning of the pasuk. Vayigash Elav Yehuda literally means Yehuda came close. In Aramaic, Kadma Va'azla is an expression that they came close. Vayigash Elav Kadma Va'azla, the trop, meaning he came close. And the next trop, Yehuda, is a Revi. That's the name of the trop. Now, Revi is the fourth son. Right? Revi is fourth. So, Vayigash Elav means Kadma Va'azla. They came close. Yehuda is Revi, the fourth son. And who came closer now to Yosef? The fourth son. Vayemer Biadeni, the trop, like we said, is Zarka Munach Segel, meaning Zarka, he was going to be thrown out. Munach, from resting. Segel in Segula, which means Gan Eden. Because Yehuda promised Yosef and Yaakov, when he was taking Binyamin, and Yaakov didn't want to send Binyamin, he said, I'll lose both worlds. I promise you will be back. So the Vilna Gaon says, even the trop of the words, Kadma Va'azla Vi Zarka Munach Segel, implies the meaning of the pasuk that the fourth son came close because he was going to be thrown out of Olam Haba. I'm going to start a short word from the Vilna Gaon. But there's a very basic question. A lot of Mefarshim ask. Rashi doesn't. And as the Rebbe always explains in the Rashi Siches, a question which is obvious and Rashi doesn't deal with it, Rashi doesn't talk about it, means that the child on their own would be able to figure it out. All the commentaries, Ramban, Daskenim Valatesis, the Akedah, you name it, they ask it. Yosef was taken away from his father for 22 years. Okay? He knew that his father was mourning. He knew his father was in mourning. So I understand when he was a slave in Egypt, when he was thrown into prison, he didn't have the opportunity to notify his father that he's alive. But once he became a viceroy, and don't forget, he became a king, then there were 7 years of plenty, and Yaakov came down to Egypt in the second year of the hunger. That means 9 years before Yaakov met Yosef, Yosef was as a king. He was in a royal position. Why didn't Yosef know, who knew his father is suffering, why didn't Yosef send a messenger to his father and say, Father, I am alive? It's an obvious question. Why didn't Yosef do it? And the answer that Yosef understood that because Yaakov was away from his father for 22 years in Lavan's house, so therefore Yosef had to be taken away from Yaakov for 22 years. First of all, there's nothing to do with Yosef. That's God's business. Even if Yosef knew it, which not necessarily he knew that. But what does that have to do? He has a mitzvah, kibbut avayim. Yosef has a mitzvah of honoring your father. If you know your father is in mourning and suffering and pain, why in the world didn't Yosef tell his father he's alive? And there's a lot of different answers. But the Rebbe explains all these answers are not good according to Rashi. There has to be a pshat. There has to be a simple meaning of why Yosef didn't tell his father. And the Rebbe explains it as follows. When the brothers threw Yosef into the pit, okay, now, Binyamin wasn't there. We know Binyamin wasn't sent. Reuven, like we discussed last time, Reuven wasn't there either. He went home to take care of his father. Okay? So now there's 12 Shvatim. Yosef is not there. Binyamin's not there. And Reuven's not there. I mean, Yosef's in the pit. But the brothers, it says it's in the Medrash, but Rashi alludes to it in Chumash. The brothers wanted to make sure nobody's going to tell Yaakov that Yosef is alive. And you have to understand there's another issue. How is it possible that for 22 years the brothers didn't do tshuva? None of them, not even one brother, had the decency to do tshuva and tell Yaakov what really happened. Why didn't they do that? They let their father suffer 22 years. And the brothers were afraid of that. The brothers were afraid that when they threw Yosef into the pit, they're going to, one of them or all of them might do tshuva and notify Yaakov that he's alive. And they didn't want to do that. So what did they do? They made a cherem. They proclaimed a ban that whoever notifies Yaakov Avinu that he's alive will be banned, excommunicated. And it's very powerful. The problem is there are 12 brothers. Reuven and Binyamin are not there. They're left with 10 brothers. Yosef definitely wouldn't be part of the ban because he was the guy thrown into the pit. So the brothers had only 9 people to make the ban, and you need a minyan. So what did the brothers do? So the Medrash says the brothers took Hashem in as the 10th. Hashem was the 10th in the ban that nobody should be able to tell Yaakov Avinu that he's alive. And that ban, after the brothers made the ban, applied to everybody. And like we mentioned in the past, Yitzchak knew that Yaakov was alive. Yitzchak knew that Yaakov was alive. Why didn't Yitzchak tell Yaakov that Yosef is alive? Because he saw Hashem didn't want. If Hashem didn't want, Yitzchak said, how could I? Yosef, even though he wasn't part of the 10, but once there was a ban that the brothers made with a minyan, as with Hashem as the 10th, the brothers made a ban that nobody is allowed to tell Yaakov Avinu that Yosef is alive until all 10 of them undo the ban. And this is in Pshat. Rashi mentions this ban that the brothers made, taking God into the mad. So then the Rebbe said it's not a question anymore. Yosef, halachically, because of the ban, was not allowed to tell his father he was alive because it was still a ban. The ban became nullified when the brothers came down and Yosef told the brothers who he is, and the brothers undid the ban, and Hashem was part of the undoing the ban. That's when the ban became nullified. But Yosef said, if Hashem didn't take off the ban, that means Yaakov still doesn't know. So then Yosef is saying to himself, that means the ban is still existing. Yosef was in the pit. He heard the brothers talking. Yosef was in the pit. He heard the brothers talking about the ban. He didn't want to be part of it, obviously. He's not going to break a ban about him. But he realized that God is the 10th. And the interesting point, we see Hashem agreed with it because even Yitzchak didn't tell Yaakov that Yosef was alive. Nobody told him he's alive. Therefore, Yosef was bound, just like Yitzchak didn't tell Yaakov because Hashem didn't want him to know. Yosef said, because of this ban, as long as Hashem and the brothers don't take it off, there's still a ban in existence that nobody's allowed to tell Yaakov I'm alive. So Yosef said, halachically, I can't do it. And there Yosef didn't tell his father that he's alive. He didn't tell his father that he's alive.
Rabbi, how did Yitzchak know?
What?
How did Yitzchak Avinu know?
Yitzchak Avinu knew by Nevuah. Rashi says, in Parshas Vayeshev, when the brothers sold him, it says Yitzchak knew. Yitzchak was crying because Yaakov was in pain. But Rashi says that Yaakov knew, Yitzchak knew that Yosef was alive. He knew he was sold. But he said if Hashem doesn't want him to know because of the ban, Yitzchak said, how can I tell him? So that's the case. Then Yosef said, I can't tell him either. As much as he was dying to tell his father and that he shouldn't suffer. And this will explain another interesting thing that we find in the Parsha. At the end of Parshas Miketz, the brothers came down to Yosef. Just to get the story straight, because there's another question that doesn't make sense. Okay? Let's get the story straight. Finally, Yaakov Avinu sends the brothers down. They went down a few times, right? One time they went down, he took he took Shimon. And he said, you can't come back until you bring Binyamin. Okay? Finally, Yaakov agreed in Parshas Miketz to send Binyamin. Sends Binyamin. The brothers come to Yosef, and Yosef says to him, how is your father? How is your father? Them not knowing that he's their brother. And they answered him, Shalom lo, he's okay, Baruch Hashem, he's well. Okay? Now, Yosef, before the brothers go home, Yosef puts the goblet in Binyamin's bag. Okay? Now, on the way home, they didn't get home. As soon as they left the city, Yosef sends his agents. They start looking it. They find it in Binyamin's bag, and the brothers come back to Egypt. Correct? And then there's the fight between Yehuda and Yosef. Finally, Yosef can't take it anymore. And Yosef says to the brothers, I'm Yosef. And right away, Yosef says like this, Ani Yosef, ha'ed avi chai, is my father still alive? They never went home in between to find out if anything changed. The brothers said to him last time when they came down with Binyamin, the brothers said to Yosef, your father is well. Shalom lo, he's okay. Then they never left. And Yosef finally tells his brothers, I am Yosef. And he says, Ani Yosef. What's his first question? They already told him he's alive. There was no news because they didn't even go home yet. So what's Yosef's question? So again, the Rebbe explains very simple, very profound. The Rashi said earlier in Chumash that when somebody, God forbid, passes away, we notice after a while the person eases up. They forget about the person. Hashem made a decree that after 12 months, you forget about the person. Not that you forget, but the feelings, you move on in life. Okay? There's a Shiva morning, a Shleishim morning, 37 days, 30 days, a year, and that's it. Then Torah says, Dayenu, enough of the morning. But on a living person, Hashem never decreed that you should forget. So now Yosef's question is, Ha'ed avichai, it's not a question, is my father alive? Because that he knew from the boys that just told him a few days ago that he's alive. Yosef's question was, now that Ani Yosef, now that I am Yosef, Ha'ed avichai doesn't mean is my father alive. How is it possible that my father is still alive? because now that I'm alive, that means the God's decree of forgetting a dead person after 12 months doesn't exist, which means Yaakov is mourning over me for 22 years. For 22 years, he's mourning over me. So Yosef said, I am Yosef, meaning I'm alive. How is it possible that my father could still be alive because I'm alive, and it means he didn't forget about me? He's still mourning over me for 22 years. That's what Yosef asked the question. But Yosef couldn't tell his father because it was a ban that Hashem didn't want him to know. And Yosef was troubled. That's why as soon as the ban was over, and therefore the pasuk continues, by the way, right away he said, Maharu valu el avi. Hurry up, leave right away and go see how my father's doing. Because every minute that he's in mourning can kill him. So Yosef says, now that I'm Yosef, and my father's like in shock. How could my father be alive? Maharu valu el avi, immediately go up and tell him I'm alive. Because Yosef understood that Yaakov is in terrible mourning for these 22 years. Another interesting thing, a short word that the Rebbe explains at the beginning of the Parsha, Vayigash of Yehuda, if said, Yosef was the superpower of the world at that time, right? Egypt, the superpower of the world. As strong as the brothers were, there were no comparison to the power of Egypt. Okay, they were not even on the same level at all in power and might. Yehuda is fighting over Binyamin. Who's he fighting against? The strongest person in the world, Yosef HaTzadik. In fact, there's a medrash, there's a lot of different medrashim, but one medrash says Yehuda got angry, he stamped his foot on the ground, the whole Egypt shook, and Pari fell off his throne. And Yosef was unimpressed by it. He called over his son, Menashe, he called over this kid, and he gave a big boulder, and Menashe went like this, and just pressed the whole thing. Pressed the whole thing. Is that what this is? He just did it. So Yehuda backed off. But the Rebbe says, you see from here an interesting point. When there's a Jewish kid in danger, Binyamin was in danger of being taken by Egypt. I don't mean only Yosef, the concept. Egypt was going to take him. Yehuda says, I don't care who I'm fighting against. When a Jewish kid is in danger, everything must be done to self-sacrifice to the extent of saving that child. We're not only talking about a physical danger, we're talking about a spiritual danger also. The lesson of Yehuda and Yosef, Yehuda didn't care who Yosef was, the most powerful man in the world, with the most powerful army. Yehuda says, there's a Jewish kid in danger, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to go save that kid. What?
If Yosef is so strong, why didn't he get away from the Ishmaelim, and why didn't he run from his brothers when they were trying to put him in the pit?
First of all, he was no match to the brothers. Yehuda was stronger than he was. We're talking about.
You just told me that Yosef was stronger.
Huh? Yehuda was stronger.
You just told me.
No, Yosef called his kid to crush a boulder, but he wasn't stronger than Yehuda. Yehuda was stronger than Yosef, and all the brothers for sure were stronger than Yosef. They're all stronger than Yosef.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, another interesting thing is when Yosef meets the brothers, he finally says, and this thing that I'm going to say now, I mentioned many, many times, but it's so profound and so important in life, it's worth repeating a million times. In the Chumash, it says, when Yosef met Binyamin, it says that Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulders here. It says like this. Vayipol al tzavare Binyamin achivu vayek. When Yosef found out, told the brothers, I'm Yosef, he fell on Binyamin, his brother's shoulders, and cried. Ubinyamin bacha al tzavarav. And Binyamin cried on Yosef's shoulders. The Rashi comments, why did Binyamin cry on Yosef's shoulders? Okay. And why did Yosef cry on Binyamin's shoulders? The Rashi says like this. The Mishkan Shilai, that lasted for a long time over 300 years until they built the Beis HaMikdash, was in Shiloh, which is in the Chelek of Yosef. The Beis HaMikdash was in the portion of Binyamin. Like you said, geographically, Yerushalayim is in the Chelek of Binyamin. So Rashi says that Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulders. What does that mean spiritually? Yosef cried because the Beis HaMikdash was going to be destroyed. And that was in Binyamin's share. So Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulders for the Beis HaMikdash that was going to be destroyed. And Binyamin cried on Yosef's shoulders because the Mishkan was in Yosef's chelek. So Binyamin cried for Yosef's destruction of the Mishkan. And Yosef cried for Binyamin's destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah? Very simple. So the question is, why did Yosef cry for Binyamin? And why did Binyamin cry for Yosef? Why didn't they cry on their own? Yosef should have cried for his destruction. Binyamin should have cried for his destruction. And Binyamin is crying for Yosef, and Yosef is crying for Binyamin. Why? So again, the Rebbe explains a very profound concept. And that is, basically, crying doesn't do anything. Crying doesn't do anything. God forbid your house gets burnt down. You're going to cry. Very nice crying. What's it going to do? God forbid your house burns down, your Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. Go build it. Don't sit there and kvetch and cry. Go build it. Somebody else's house is burnt. That I can't do anything about. That's his thing. He got to deal with it. Then I cry to show I feel for the person. Then he cried because I feel for the person. But the Rebbe says, on somebody's own destruction, don't sit there and cry. That comes from the Yetzer Hara. Because what you really need to do when you have a destruction, go get up and go build it. And therefore, Yosef is not going to cry on Yosef, and Binyamin is not going to cry on Binyamin. Binyamin has to build his Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed, and Yosef has to build his Beis HaMikdash, his Mishkan that was destroyed. There's a story, I mentioned it in Shul many times, Rabbi Levitansky, Alav Shalom, that used to live here. So we grew up together in Chicago. He was older than I am, but we lived a block away from each other in Chicago. And I remember his father very, very well. And his father was a diamond merchant. But in those days, they used to travel salesmen with, diamonds in their bags. And they would go, and he used to go in the Midwest, in the back roads of the Midwest, selling diamonds. And he once comes to an area by a farm, and he sees a whole bunch of people are gathered, and there was a fire there in the barn, and everybody, all the neighbors got together, and they're sitting and crying. So he says, what's going on over here? So they said, we're very sorry that the guy's house burned down. We're very sorry. So he was a very strong person, a lively person. He had a good sense of humor also. He took out I don't know, was it $5 in his pocket, $10. Then those days, $5 was like $1,000 today. And he said to the owner of the farm, he gave him the $10 and he said, I'm $10 sorry. And he turned to each person and says, how sorry are you? Don't sit there and kvetch and cry and say, I'm sorry. Do something about it. Give the guy money to rebuild. Crying doesn't do anything. Crying is good for somebody else has a problem. You can't fix their problem. You can't rectify their problem. Go ahead and cry. At least show some feeling for them. Feel bad for them. But on your own churban and your own destruction, that you're not allowed to do. And this explains another thing in the Parsha. Yaakov meets Yosef. Okay? I'm going out of order because at this point I want to mention. Yaakov meets Yosef. So, again, it says in the Pasuk, Parak Mavav, Pasuk Chavtes, it says, Vayesa Yosef Mekafta, Yosef saddled his chariot, Vayalik Aviv graciously went up to meet his father, Vayeda Elev, he saw him, Vayipal Atzavarav, listen to this, Yosef cried on Yaakov's shoulders, Vayef Kal Tzavarav, and he cried again. Okay, the pasuk says Yosef meets Yaakov. Yosef cries twice on Yaakov's shoulders. That's what the pasuk says. Now what happened to Yaakov? So Rashi says, "Avol Yaakov le'nafal tzavari Yosef le'noshokan." Yaakov didn't fall on Yosef's shoulders and he didn't cry. Why? Didn't see his son for 22 years. Rashi says, "Amar Rabbeinu sheyekerius Shema." Yaakov is reading the Shema. Yaakov is reading the Shema. He can't cry on his son's shoulders. You listen to the story. Just picture the story. Okay? They didn't have helicopters in those days if you just drop down. Okay? Yosef's coming up from Egypt. Yaakov's coming from Eretz Yisrael. Okay? And they're traveling. Yosef went to meet his father. Now, Yosef went with a bunch of people. Yaakov went down with 70 people. Obviously, it was pretty noticeable from the distance that somebody's coming. Yaakov couldn't read the Shema a little bit earlier, a little bit later. The only time he read the Shema was when Yosef is crying on the shoulders. Yaakov is not crying on the shoulders because he has to read the Shema. It's totally illogical. We could have read the Shema. How long does it take the Shema? Even if he said it long, 5 minutes, they were definitely saw each other more than 5 minutes away. Yaakov should have went and said right away, Shema Yisrael, before he met Yosef. And now he meets Yosef. Yosef, he should cry on Yosef's shoulder. He didn't see him for 22 years. So what is it? What's the story over here? It's the same thing we just discussed. Because Rashi says, why did Yosef, the Medrash says, why did Yosef cry on Yaakov's shoulders? And he cried again. So Rashi says he cried for the various different, Rashi doesn't, the Medrash says, he cried for the one base of Mikdash destroyed. He cried again for the second base of Mikdash that was destroyed. He cried twice because Yaakov had a bunch of chubanis. Yaakov didn't cry. Not because he could have read Shema a different time. Yaakov didn't cry because he was reading Shema. What happened over here? Again, you're talking about destruction of the Jewish people. Yaakov Avinu is the father of the nation. All the problems that the Jewish people had, Yaakov Avinu felt. Yaakov Avinu knew and he felt. Yaakov Avinu understood that if there's destruction in Klal Yisrael, it's not a time to cry. It's a time to read the Shema. What's the inyan of reading the Shema? The Gemara says, the Medrash says, the Gemara says in Brachas, that when you read the Shema, it's like you're holding a double-edged sword. You're sharp on both sides, killing all the evil forces. In fact, we say that pasuk, Cherev pipias biyadam in Krishma lamita. We speak about the double-edged sword that kills all the evil. Yosef can't do anything for Yaakov's destruction. Yaakov represents the whole Klal Yisrael. Yosef is only one person. So Yosef's crying again and again on Yaakov's shoulders for the churban and the destructions that Yaakov Avinu had. But Yaakov, what am I going to do crying? What's crying going to help? I need to rebuild. The temples were destroyed. I need to rebuild. How do you rebuild? By making Krishma with the double-edged sword to kill out all the evil forces. And this now the whole story makes sense with Yosef and Binyamin and Yaakov and Yosef. It wasn't that they didn't feel anything. Of course they felt. But they were teaching us a lesson. They understood it, but they're teaching us a lesson. God forbid when a person has a disaster. God forbid a person has a problem. God forbid a person has a debt, whatever it may be. The Torah teaches us, don't cry. Crying's not going to do anything. Go rebuild. Somebody else has a problem. Be a little sensitive and cry for them. Show that you care about them. But for your own destruction, no, it doesn't work like that. Okay, now another interesting question. Before Yaakov was going down to Egypt, the pasuk says, "Vas Yehuda Achishi, Shalach lefanav al Yosef laheris lefanav Geishna." Yaakov, before he came down to Egypt, sent Yehuda ahead. And Rashi says, why did he send Yaakov ahead? Yehuda ahead? He says to open a yeshiva in Mitzrayim. Okay? Yaakov knows the mishpacha, the family, 70 Jews coming down to Egypt, they need a yeshiva. You can't be in Egypt you can't live anywhere without a yeshiva. So what did Yaakov Avinu do? Before he went down to Egypt, he sent Yehuda to open a yeshiva in Egypt. Which, by the way, Levi, Yaakov's son Levi, ended up to be the Rosh Yeshiva in the yeshiva in Mitzrayim, the Gemara says, the Medrash says. So the obvious question is like this. It would have made more sense for Yaakov to email or text Yosef and say, do me a favor, open a yeshiva before I get there. He had the money. He had the ability. He had the power. Why did Yaakov send Yehuda, that Yehuda should open the yeshiva? Why didn't Yaakov at least send Yehuda to tell Yosef to open a yeshiva? Yaakov didn't ask Yosef to open a yeshiva. Why not? And again, the explanation is very simple. Yosef, and I'm going to say an introduction because this is going to answer a bunch of other issues also. The difference between Yosef and the brothers, Chassidut explains, is a fundamental difference in their level. Meaning, the brothers were shepherds. Even when they came to power, Yosef said, tell them that you're shepherds. The brothers were shepherds. What's the inyan of a shepherd? Moshe, by the way, was a shepherd. Yaakov Avinu was a shepherd by Lavan. Okay, we find the others were shepherds. Why were they shepherds? A shepherd is very easy to serve Hashem. You go out into the field, you're secluded from the world, the animals eat, and you can sit and learn Torah the whole time. You're not occupied in worldly things. You have time to sit and learn. And you're not, so the others and the Shvatim were shepherds. Why were they shepherds? Because they didn't feel, and this is true, by the way, they didn't have the ability to be in world and remain on their kedusha, remain on their level. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. the Shvatim and the Yaakov Avinu also, by the way. Yaakov Avinu did not have the ability to be in a Mitzrayim and be religious. Only Yosef had that ability. And that's why Yosef is called Yosef HaTzadik. Besides the fact that he passed the test with Potiphar's wife. But it says in Chassidus, why was Yosef called Yosef HaTzadik? Because Yosef's greatness was to be in Mitzrayim, the most corrupt country in the world, and yet be religious. And Yaakov didn't believe that Yosef could do it, by the way. When Yosef sent the brothers home to Yaakov, and he said to them, the brothers came back, and they said, Ha'ed Yosef Chai, Yosef's alive, V'chi hu meishel b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And he's a leader in Egypt. What did the brothers tell Yaakov? They said, Vayigidu leimer, Ha'ed Yosef Chai, Yosef's alive, V'chi hu meishel b'chol eretz, he's the leader of Egypt. What does the pasuk say? Ki lohem min lam, he didn't believe them. What made him believe? He saw the wagons that Yosef sent. He saw the wagons that Yosef sent. Then he believed and he became alive. So Rashi says, what's special about these wagons? Because Yosef, when he left his father 22 years earlier, when the father sent Yosef to the brothers in Parsha Vayigash to see how they're doing, he was learning with him the Gemara of Egla Arufa, the laws of Egla Arufa. What's Egla Arufa? You find a dead body outside of a city, you measure to the closest, you don't know who killed it, you measure to the closest city, the elders come, being a carbon, they say we never, our hands did not shed this blood, you chop off the head of the calf, and so on and so forth. When Yosef sent a message home to his father, he knew his father was not going to believe him. Because not Yaakov was on that level, not the Shvatim were on that level. To be in Mitzrayim and to be religious. When Yosef sends the message to the father, and the father, again, we're not talking physically. The brothers say to Yaakov, hey, Abba, Ta, Pa, whatever you call him, Yosef's alive and he's in Egypt. He's ruling Egypt. Yaakov said, it can't be. Yosef cannot be alive like Yosef and be in Mitzrayim. He can't be. Because Yaakov didn't have that level. When he saw the wagons, meaning Yosef sent him a sign, Father, I remember what we learned 22 years ago, so I'm still with it in Yiddishkeit. So then Yaakov said, Yosef is a level that we don't have. Yosef is a level that he can handle Mitzrayim. Only Yosef could do that. The Rebbe explains, nowadays, after Yosef broke through the barrier, after Matan Torah, every Jew, because we're called Nei Katzen Yosef, we're called Yosef sheep, now every Jew could be in the world and at the same time be a religious Jew. But therefore, though, when Yaakov wanted to open a yeshiva, he knew Yosef was good. But Yaakov said, no, when it comes to learning Torah, I need somebody dedicated entirely to learning. I can't have Yosef involved. As great as Yosef is, he's involved in politics. He's involved in other things. In fact, Yosef and Menashe both were. Ephraim was learning with Yaakov. But Yosef HaTzadik, he couldn't open a yeshiva, Yaakov said. I'm sure he helped. But to open a yeshiva, you need somebody who's dedicated 24/7 into learning. And this explains a very interesting halacha that the Rebbe quoted many times by Fabrengen and explained it. There's a din in Chesed Mishpat, the beginning of Chesed Mishpat. there's a din that das balabatim, that the knowledge of business people, heipach das Torah, is contrary to Torah's opinion. The mind of a business person is against Torah. That's what the Gemara, the halacha says. Das balabatim, the das of a balabas, heipach das Torah is against das Torah. And the Rebbe explains this halacha. He says, obviously, we're not talking about an ignorant Jew, an illiterate Jew, because I don't need to tell me that it's against the Torah. This halacha refers to somebody who knows how to learn very well. They're a brilliant scholar, but they're involved in business, in worldly things also. There are many business people out there that are brilliant Torah scholars. So the Rebbe explains what the Smeh says. Das balabatim heipach das Torah means a Jew that knows how to learn. But if you want to know what is Torah's opinion, not learning opinion, what is Torah opinion in worldly things, you can't have somebody who's involved in the world, because it's not true blue godliness. They're involved in the world. They're not 24/7 in Torah. And therefore, you want das Torah, you need to go to people that are 24/7 in Torah. They can give the opinion of Torah because it's not, I'm using a sharp expression, it's not warped or compromised by the worldly things that the person is into. Okay, so therefore, Yosef, as great as he was, couldn't open the yeshiva. And therefore, Yaakov sent Yehuda down to do it because he wanted to have a yeshiva properly. Okay, next thing is like this. Another interesting point. There's two more points I want to say, and one will take some time. But we know that when Yaakov came down, it says altogether were 70. In this week's Parsha, it says when Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, Kol nefesh yetze yerech Yaakov was Shiva, 70. So Rashi asks, but if you count all the names together, it's only 69. Okay? The Medrash asks the question. One answer is the 70th was Yaakov. Another answer is the 70th was Hashem. But Rashi doesn't answer that. Rashi answers according to the opinion of the Medrash that who is number 70? Yocheved, who was born in the walls coming down to Egypt. The Medrash says, and Rashi quotes it, when Yaakov came down with the family, Yocheved, Moshe's mother, was born as they were entering Egypt in the walls, going through customs, whatever they had then. That's when Yocheved was born. And she made number 70. The number of 70 Jews is a very, very special number. First of all, it corresponds with the 70 nations of the world. It corresponds with the 10 Sfiros, each one composed of 7, which is 70. The number 70 in Kedusha, in Torah, is an extremely holy number. That's why there's 70 nations. There's 70 Jews that entered Egypt, which from the 70 Jews came out the 600,000 Jews. So yes, we're all part of 600,000 Jews, but the 600,000 Jews really originated in the original 70. Who made number 70? Who completed number 70? The Rebbe said a little baby girl just born. Not bas mitzvah, not super brilliant yet, not super holy yet. She just came out of her mother's womb. And she was the one that completed number 70, the completeness of the Jewish people. And the Rebbe explains, look at the phenomenal greatness of a little Jewish baby, boy or girl. They made up number 70 for the entire Klal Yisrael, which was a very superly great number. Who finalized it? Rashi says, not like the opinion that's Hashem, not like the opinion is Yaakov Avinu, a little baby girl, composed and comprised the number 70 of Klal Yisrael, showing the greatness of a little baby girl. Okay, there's one more interesting thing that I want to talk about. I hope I'll finish by 9. I hope 15 minutes. If you look at the beginning of the Parsha, opening pasuk is Vayigash Elav Yehuda. Yehuda came close to Yosef, right? Yehuda came close to Yosef and he said, please, what are you doing? I want this kid back. So Yehuda is coming close to Yosef. In the Haftarah, which we're going to read this week, the pasuk also speaks about Yehuda and Yosef. But over there, the pasuk is speaking in the Haftarah about Yosef going to Yehuda. Not Yehuda, like at the beginning of the Parsha, in Chumash. Yehuda is going to Yosef, but Yosef is going to Yehuda. Okay? What is that? What is this? Going him in? What is this? So I'm going to speak. So we're learning this in the morning in the Maimer and Chassidus between the two minyanim in the morning, but I'm going to mention it because obviously a lot of people are not there at that time. I'm going to go off a little bit, and then I'm going to bring it all together, I hope. There's an argument in the Gemara and Chagiga between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. What did God create first? Did God create heaven first? Or did God create earth first? What did God create first? What's the argument? Because at the beginning of Chumash it says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. What's mentioned first? Heaven, then earth. So obviously that pasuk says heaven came first. The last pasuk at the end of creation, it says, B'yayim haseis Hashem Elokim. Elo told the Shemaim, but this is the world. B'hi barum, when he created it. B'yayim haseis Hashem Elokim. Eretz v'shamayim. Earth and heaven. Beginning of Chumash it says Shamayim, then Eretz. At the end of the Parsha, right, at the end of creation, it says Eretz v'shamayim. So there's an argument. What did God create first? Heaven or earth? One opinion says God created heaven or earth first, and the other one said God created earth first. Now, there's an obvious question. You can't have an argument in a fact. Which one did God create first? You can have an argument in halacha, kosher, not kosher. You're allowed to, you're not allowed to. That you can argue. But in a fact, is it, or which one did God create first? We have a similar question, similar argument. There's an argument in the Gemara between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. When did God create the world? Did he create the world in Tishrei? Or did he create the world in Nisan? And again, either Nisan or Tishrei. He can't. When did he create the world? Either Nisan or Tishrei. So the answer to both questions are like this. There is what's called in thought, and there is in action. Meaning like this. In actual creation, God created heaven first, and then earth. God created the world Tishrei first. What do these opinions say? God created earth first, or Nisan first? It means, what is the purpose of creation? Is the purpose of creation heaven, or is the purpose of creation earth? Physically, God created heaven first and then earth, because heaven is higher than earth. Heaven represents the spiritual worlds, Atzilis, Bria, Yetzira, Asiyat, the spiritual worlds. Earth represents this physical world. What did God create first? The spiritual worlds were created first, and then the physical world. But what is the purpose of creation? So the halacha is the purpose of creation is not for Gan Eden. It's not for Olam Haba. It's not for Atzilas, Bria, Yitzir, Nasiya, spiritual. The purpose of creation is for the physical world. We find a very interesting thing. The Mishkan, like we said before, was in Yosef's part, Mishkan Shilai. The Mishkan represents Yosef. The Beis HaMikdash, yes, it was in Binyamin, but Yehuda and Binyamin had the 10 tribes, and then Yehuda and Binyamin. So Yehuda and Binyamin had the Beis HaMikdash in their share. Now, the Rebbe asks a very simple question. The Mishkan in the Midbar, okay? They had the floor of the Mishkan, the earth, dirt. Then the walls were made out of the wood, Atzi Shitin, correct, wood. And on top of the Mishkan were the goat skins. Okay? Now, look at the Mishkan. Top is animal, walls plant, and the bottom inanimate. Higher, lower, lowest. Correct? Highest, animal, plant, inanimate. What was the Beis HaMikdash made out of? All stone. The Beis HaMikdash was not allowed to have wood. They had wood in the ceiling as support beams, but you're not allowed to build the Beis HaMikdash with wood. What was it built with? Stone. Stone is inanimate. Why in the world should God create the permanent home of God with stone, the lowest? Why didn't God create the Beis HaMikdash with animal skin and wood, at least higher things than rock, than stone, inanimate, lifeless? And to paraphrase it with a different question or a statement. Everything we sustain ourselves from, all the produce, okay? Everything we eat comes from the ground. Any way you look at it, everything comes from the ground. The bread we eat, the water we eat, the fruits we eat, everything comes from the ground. That means we are sustaining ourselves from dirt, the lowest. Why is that? And if earth is lower than heaven, why is the purpose earth rather than heaven? Coming back to the original question. God created heaven first. But what's the purpose? The purpose of creation is earth. Why? If heaven is higher than earth, why in the world is the purpose of creation earth? The purpose of the creation is this word Olam Hazeh, not Gan Eden. Why? And the Rebbe explains in the Maimer as follows. We learned this many times, this concept. The fact that down here, earth and stones are inanimate, low, nothing lower, stepped on, no life, is because they originate in a very high place. The higher the thing, the lower it falls. You have a wall, the wall falls down. The higher part of the wall falls further away from the original place of the wall. Which means the fact that stones down here are the lowest, earth down here is the lowest, it shows in the source. In reality, stones are higher than than plant and animal. And therefore, like this, in the normal routine of worlds, God made heaven and then earth. Heaven is higher than earth. Therefore, in the Mishkan, which was God's temporary home, not permanent home, temporary home, God created the world like it is. On top was animal skin, animal life. The walls are wood, which is plant life. And the floor was earth, which is inanimate. That's the way the world is today. Spiritual is higher than physical. Atzilus is higher than Bria, and this world, it's lower. When Mashiach comes, because it will be the essential revelation of godliness, the essence of God will be revealed. We will see that stones are even greater than plant and animal. And therefore, the Beis HaMikdash, which was God's permanent home, which is similar to the era of Mashiach, over there Hashem said, I'm going to build the Beis HaMikdash with stone, because in essence, stone is even greater. It's even holier. Okay? Now, let's go back to Yehuda and Yosef. Yosef, the word Yosef means hosafa, adding, growth, right? That's what the word hosafa means, growth, growing. What does Yehuda mean? Hoda'ah, submission and bittul. What do we say in Shemona Esrei? V'nafshi ka'afar lakol tihiyah. If you want to speak about being humble, we speak about the earth being, we should be like earth. We should be humble. Yehuda represents earth, stone, bittul, inanimate. If you bottle, you're completely inanimate. Plant life keeps growing. Yosef represents growth. Yehuda represents Evan, stone, earth, bittul. In this world, now, plant is higher than dirt. In this world, if plant is greater than earth, so Yehuda, bittul, earth, has to go to Yosef, who is greater than him, because plant, hosafa, is greater than the plant, than the inanimate. The Haftarah is speaking about when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, Yosef is going to be subservient to Yehuda, because when Mashiach comes, the inanimate is going to be even greater. Because this world is the ultimate purpose of creation. And therefore, now in Chumash, in this world, Yehuda has to go to Yosef, meaning the Torah is teaching us inanimate is not as great as Yosef plant, and therefore the inanimate has to go to the plant. When Mashiach comes, inanimate is going to be greater, because now it's lower, so then it's going to be greater. Then Yosef will go to Yehuda. And that's the difference. And that's why the Mishkan, which is temporary, was built properly, higher animal, wood, earth. The Beis HaMikdash, Mashiach, permanency, that is built from stone. And that's explained why in the Parsha, Yehuda goes to Yosef, and after Yosef goes to Yehuda. Okay, like it says, Ten l'chacham v'yech gamei, give al chacham, and he'll understand it even more. Anyway, Mitzvah Shem Wednesday night is the Halach and Tanya class. Again, this class is sponsored by Yehuda Greenberg in honor of her birthday, which was today. Wish her a successful year and all good things. And until Wednesday night, everybody have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's
We'll see you,
wonderful.
Mitzvah Shem.
Thank you so much.
Have a good
everybody.
night.
So
Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
great.